The first thing Camilla said when she walked into my home was, "It smells so old-fashioned in here." I smiled and welcomed her, even as she clung to my son Daniel's arm and let her eyes wander over my living room, taking in the crocheted pillows, the faded family photos, the old upright piano that hadn't been tuned in years. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her gaze was sharp, and I could feel her measuring me, weighing every detail against some invisible standard. I told myself to be gracious, to remember that first impressions are hard, but something in her tone made my heart beat a little faster. Dinner was simple, just the dishes I'd made for Daniel since he was a boy. Steamed rice, roasted chicken with lemon and herbs, green beans tossed with garlic, and a loaf of bread I'd baked that morning. Camilla complimented every bite, her words light and practiced. "So healthy, not greasy at all." "My mother would be surprised," Daniel beamed. Proud to have his fiancée at the table, and I tried to focus on his happiness. Not the way Camilla's compliments felt like little barbs. Her parents arrived a few minutes late. A stiff couple in expensive clothes who smiled too much and spoke in careful English. The conversation bounced from real estate to Daniel's job to the wedding date they were already pushing for. I kept the tea flowing, the rice warm, and my face calm, even as I felt myself fading into the background of my own home. Halfway through the meal, Camilla leaned toward her mother and switched to Spanish. Her voice dropped, but I caught every word. "She has no idea what we're saying. Look at her, so clueless, so desperate to impress. I'll marry the son, get the visa, get out. 1 year tops. Then I'll find someone with real money." Her mother dabbed her mouth with her napkin and replied, "Just keep pretending to like the food." "You're almost there." I didn't flinch. I picked up the rice bowl and offered it to Camilla's father, then cleared my throat and said in the same fluent Spanish I'd used in classrooms for over 3 decades, "Would you like more rice, sir? And please tell your daughter I taught this language before she was even born." The room went silent. Camilla's face drained of color. Daniel looked between us, confused. I smiled again, not the polite kind, but the kind that says, "Now you know." We finished dinner in a strained quiet. I served dessert anyway, a flan I'd made from my mother's recipe, and watched as Camilla picked at it, her hands suddenly unsure. The dishes from that night are still drying on the rack. I haven't touched them, not because I'm sentimental, but because every time I look at that rice bowl, I hear her voice again. That clueless, old-fashioned woman won't know a thing. I've been called worse. Students who didn't pass, parents angry over grades, colleagues who thought tenure meant power. I survived all of them with the same tools: clarity, silence, and a memory that files away everything. I taught Spanish literature at the university for 32 years. I didn't just teach language, I taught the roots of it. I could recite poetry from Lorca, quote Cervantes, and explain idioms that don't translate cleanly into English. I knew how words cut deeper when said with a smile, and that's exactly what Camilla did. She performed kindness like a well-rehearsed play, compliments on my cute little home, laughs that never reached her eyes, offering to clear plates, but never actually lifting one. Daniel didn't notice. He's smart, just not in this way. He's always been warm, eager to please, unwilling to believe that anyone could lie with that much ease. He thinks people like Camilla are rare. I know better. When my husband was alive, he said I was too forgiving. "You give people the benefit of the doubt," he'd say. "One day someone's going to use that against you." I used to laugh, not because I disagreed, but because I knew the moment someone did, I'd be ready. Now here I am, 66, alone in the house he built, still holding the scent of linseed in the wood. My hands aren't as quick, but my instincts are sharper than ever. And Camilla, she mistook that quiet for blindness. That was her mistake. Mine was thinking she deserved the same grace I gave my students. But as I lay in bed that night, the words looping in my mind, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just hurt, I was awake, and I knew for the first time in a long time that I would not let this go. My home has always been my sanctuary. It's not grand, but it's warm, filled with the scent of coffee in the morning, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the gentle creak of floorboards that have carried 3 generations of my family. The living room is a patchwork of memories. Daniel's childhood drawings still taped to the side of the bookshelf, my late husband's favorite armchair by the window, and a faded rug I bought at a yard sale the year my daughter Sophia was born. The kitchen is my domain, a place where I've spent decades kneading dough, simmering stews and listening to the laughter, or sometimes the arguments of my children and grandchildren. I've always been the matriarch, the one who remembers every birthday, who bakes the pies for Thanksgiving, who sends cards and small gifts for every occasion. I was the one who kept the family together after my husband died, the one who made sure Daniel and Sophia never missed a doctor's appointment, the one who stayed up late sewing costumes and helping with homework. I worked as a Spanish teacher for 32 years, saving every penny so my children could have what I never did. I never remarried, never even dated, telling myself that my family was enough. Daniel, my eldest, has always been the golden child. Charming, ambitious, and as he got older, a little too used to getting his way. He's a software engineer now, with a good job and a nice apartment in the city. He calls every Sunday, but the conversations are short, distracted, full of background noise and half-finished sentences. He's always been warm, eager to please, unwilling to believe that anyone could lie with that much ease. He thinks people like Camilla are rare. I know better. Sophia, my daughter, is quieter, more thoughtful. She lives a few hours away with her husband and 2 children, but she calls often, always asking how I'm doing, always offering to help. She worries about me, but she's busy with her own life, her job as a nurse, her kids' school projects, her husband's long hours at the hospital. I miss her, but I understand. Not everyone is built for the noise and mess of a big family. My grandchildren are the light of my life. I know each of their favorite foods, their allergies, their bedtime routines. I keep a drawer full of art supplies and board games, and I never mind the mess they leave behind. I love the way they pile onto my lap for story time, the way they fight over who gets to help me in the kitchen, the way they whisper secrets in my ear. I tell myself that all the work, all the babysitting, the school pickups, the sleepovers is worth it for these moments. But as the years have passed, I've begun to notice the subtle ways I'm being edged out of my own life. Daniel and Camilla make decisions without me, plan vacations and holidays, and then inform me of my role. We'll drop the kids off at noon, Mom. You know the drill. Camilla will text, never asking, always telling. Daniel will call to check in, but the conversations are short, distracted, full of background noise and half-finished sentences. The grandchildren, growing older, start to see me less as a source of wisdom and more as a convenient solution to their parents' problems. Camilla, Daniel's fiancée, is a study in contradictions. She's beautiful, with a smile that lights up a room, but her eyes are always calculating, always watching. She's quick with compliments, but they never quite ring true. She brings gifts, fancy teas, scented candles, expensive chocolates, but there's always a sense that she's keeping score. She laughs at Daniel's jokes, flatters my cooking, and offers to help with the dishes, but somehow never actually lifts a finger. She's polite to my face, but I've caught her rolling her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking. There's a carefulness to her, a way she watches me as if she's waiting for me to slip up, to say something she can use against me. I try to brush it off, telling myself she's just shy, just trying to fit in. But there are moments, small, fleeting, when I feel like an outsider in my own family. When Daniel and Camilla exchange glances over the dinner table. When Camilla changes the subject if I ask too many questions. When Daniel brushes off my concerns with a quick, "It's fine. Mom, don't worry." I try to ignore the feeling. Try to focus on the joy of becoming a grandmother again, on the hope that the wedding will bring us all closer together. If only I'd known what was coming. If only I'd listened to that small voice inside me, the one that whispered that something wasn't right. But I was so eager to believe in the promise of new beginnings, so desperate to hold my family together, that I missed the signs. I missed the way Camilla's eyes would flicker when I mentioned the wedding. The way Daniel would change the subject when I asked about their plans, the way the invitations stayed unmailed, the guest list always almost finished. Looking back, I can see it all so clearly. But at the time, I was just a mother, a soon-to-be mother-in-law, doing her best to love her family and keep them safe. The week before the dinner, I noticed Camilla acting more secretive than usual. She spent long hours on the phone, speaking in rapid Spanish, her voice low and urgent. She started locking her phone, glancing over her shoulder when she texted. One afternoon, I overheard her in the hallway, whispering to someone about the paperwork and making sure no one finds out. My heart pounded, but I told myself it was just wedding stress, just nerves. But then, 2 days before the dinner, I caught her in the living room, rifling through my desk drawers. She jumped when she saw me, her smile too quick, her explanation too rehearsed. "I was just looking for a pen, Mama Rosa. I wanted to write a thank you note." I nodded, but I made a mental note to check my files. That night, I found a folder missing, one that held copies of my will, my life insurance policy, and the deed to the house. I confronted Daniel, but he brushed me off. "Camilla's just trying to help, Mom. She wants to make sure everything's in order for the wedding. You're overthinking things." I wanted to believe him, but the unease in my chest wouldn't go away. The night of the dinner, I watched Camilla closely. She was all smiles and laughter, charming my family, making everyone feel at ease. But I saw the way she watched me, the way her eyes narrowed when she thought I wasn't looking. I saw the way she leaned into Daniel, whispering in his ear, her hand resting possessively on his arm. If only they knew what I was capable of. How much I noticed, how much I remembered, how fiercely I could fight when pushed. I felt a slow burn of anger begin to replace my sadness. I was tired of being dismissed, tired of being taken for granted. I resolved to keep my eyes open, to trust my instincts, to be ready for whatever was coming. And as I stood in the kitchen, the warmth of the holiday lights flickering around me, I realized that the season's joy was giving way to a chill I couldn't ignore. Something was wrong, and I was determined to find out what it was, no matter what it cost me. Something was wrong, and I was determined to find out what it was, no matter what it cost me. That determination was still simmering inside me the night of the dinner, when the house was full of voices and the table was set with my best dishes. I'd spent the day preparing, roasting chicken, simmering beans, baking flan from my mother's recipe. I wanted everything to be perfect, to show Camilla and her family that they were welcome, that I was proud to become part of their lives. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one Daniel always said brought out my eyes, and I set the table with the good silver, the linen napkins I'd saved for special occasions. The evening started well enough. Camilla's parents arrived first, all polite smiles and careful English. Daniel was nervous, fussing over the wine, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Camilla was charming, complimenting the food, laughing at Daniel's jokes, asking about my garden and my teaching days. For a while, I let myself believe that maybe I'd been wrong, that maybe the tension I'd felt was just nerves. But as the meal went on, I noticed Camilla's eyes flicking toward her parents, her smile tightening whenever Daniel wasn't looking. She switched to Spanish, speaking quickly and quietly, but I caught every word. "She has no idea what we're saying. Look at her, so old, so desperate to impress. I'll marry the son, get the visa, get out. 1 year tops. Then I'll find someone with real money." Her mother nodded, dabbing her mouth with her napkin. "Just keep pretending to like the food. You're almost there." I felt the blood drain from my face. I kept my hands steady, kept my smile in place, but inside I was shaking. I looked at Daniel, so eager to please, so blind to the cruelty unfolding right in front of him. I wanted to scream, to stand up and demand respect, but I stayed silent. I poured more wine, passed the bread, and listened as Camilla and her parents continued their performance. The conversation turned to the wedding. Camilla's father asked about the guest list, the venue, the honeymoon. Camilla laughed, her voice light and sweet. "We're still deciding. Daniel wants something small, but I think we deserve a big celebration. After all, it's not every day you marry into a family like this." Her eyes flicked to me, and I saw the challenge there, the certainty that I wouldn't dare speak up. I watched as Daniel beamed, oblivious to the undercurrent of mockery. I watched as Camilla's mother complimented my flan, then whispered in Spanish that it was too sweet, too heavy, just like her. I watched as Camilla's father asked about my late husband, then made a joke in Spanish about old women and their stories. I felt my cheeks burn, but I refused to let them see me cry. The worst moment came when Camilla leaned across the table, her voice low and conspiratorial. "You know, Daniel, your mother is so generous. She's already offered to help with the down payment on our new apartment. Isn't that right, Rosa? Her parents smiled, nodding in agreement. Daniel looked at me, surprised. Mom, I didn't know, I forced a smile. We'll talk about it later, mijo. Camila's eyes sparkled with triumph. She thought she'd won, that I would just nod and agree, that I would keep giving until there was nothing left. But something inside me snapped. I realized, in that moment, that I had been left with nothing but my pride, and that was something I wasn't willing to give up. After dinner, as I cleared the table, I listened to Camila and her parents laughing in the living room, their voices drifting through the house like a cold wind. Daniel came into the kitchen, his face flushed with happiness. Thank you, Mom. Tonight was perfect. Camila's parents loved you. I smiled, but my heart was heavy. I'm glad, Daniel. I just want you to be happy. He hugged me, then went back to join Camila. I stood at the sink washing dishes, my mind racing. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting my family first, about the sacrifices I'd made, about the way I'd been dismissed and taken for granted. I thought about the way Camila had looked at me, the way she'd spoken about me, the way she'd assumed I was too old, too slow, too blind to see what was happening. But I saw everything. I remembered everything, and for the first time I felt a glimmer of something new, resolve. I would not let Camila use me. I would not let her take my son, my family, my dignity. I would fight back, quietly at first, but with a strength she couldn't imagine. That night, as I lay in bed, the words from dinner echoing in my mind, I began to make a plan. I would watch, I would listen, and I would wait for the right moment to show Camila and Daniel who I really was. If only they knew what I was capable of. If only they knew what I was capable of. The days after that dinner felt like moving through water. Every step slow, every sound muffled, every emotion heavy and hard to name. I went through my routines, but nothing felt the same. I baked bread, but the smell didn't comfort me. I watered the garden, but the colors seemed dull. I called Sophia, but I didn't tell her what had happened. I didn't want to worry her, not when she had her own family to care for. Instead, I kept the pain to myself, letting it settle in my chest like a stone. Daniel called the next evening, his voice bright and oblivious. Camila says thank you again for dinner, Mom. She really wants you to be part of the wedding planning. She said you have such good taste. I could hear Camila's laughter in the background, light and musical, and I wondered if she was mocking me again, this time in English. I forced a smile into my voice. Of course, mijo. Just let me know what you need. But I was watching now. I noticed the way Camila's texts became more frequent, always asking for small favors. Could I pick up a package? Could I watch the dog? Could I send over my birth certificate for the wedding paperwork? I noticed the way Daniel seemed more distracted, more tired, as if he was carrying a weight he didn't understand. I noticed the way Camila's parents stopped calling me Señora Rosa and started calling me Mama, as if they were already part of the family, as if my approval was a formality they could collect and file away. The gossip started soon after. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce aisle. Did you hear? Daniel's fiancée is so beautiful, but I heard she's only marrying him for the visa. Rosa's so lucky, but I bet she's worried. You know how these things go. At church, Mrs. Alvarez gave me a pitying look and pressed my hand a little too tightly. If you ever need anything, dear, you know where to find me. I forced a smile, but inside I was burning. I wanted to scream that I wasn't helpless, that I wasn't losing my mind, that I was still the same woman who had held her family together through every storm. The children sensed the tension, too. My youngest granddaughter, Lucia, called one night. Abuela, is everything okay? Mom says you're sad. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Everything's fine, mi amor. Sometimes grown-ups just need to figure things out. But I could hear the worry in her voice, the way she clung to the hope that I could fix things, just like I always had. Camila's manipulations grew bolder. She sent group texts to the family, painting herself as the victim. We just want a little help, but apparently that's too much to ask. I guess some people don't care about family anymore. Daniel followed suit, calling Sophia to complain. Mom's being unreasonable. She's always been stubborn, but this is too much. We're just asking for a little support. She can't even give us that? Sophia, bless her, stood up for me. She called after one of Daniel's rants, her voice full of quiet anger. Don't listen to them, Mama. You've done more than enough. You deserve a break. You deserve respect. Her words were a balm, a reminder that not everyone saw me as a convenience. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon, as I was sorting through the mail, I found an envelope addressed to Camilla, tucked behind a stack of catalogs. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a notice of overdue payments, a warning that Camilla's student visa was about to expire. My heart pounded as I read the letter. Camilla was in trouble, serious trouble. That's why she needed to marry Daniel. That's why she was so desperate to secure her place in the family. I felt a surge of anger, sharper than anything I'd felt before. She hadn't just taken me for granted, she'd lied to all of us, used us to cover up her own mistakes. I realized, in that moment, that I was done being her safety net. I was done cleaning up her messes. That night, I called Marjorie, my oldest friend. She listened quietly as I poured out the whole story, the overheard conversation, the canceled catering, the overdue visa. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, then said, "You've always been the strong one, Rosa. Maybe it's time to let them see what happens when you stop saying yes." I took her words to heart. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine a life that wasn't built around everyone else's needs. I called the church and volunteered to help with their holiday dinner for families who had nowhere else to go. I signed up for a painting class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I even invited a few friends over for a quiet Christmas Eve. Just us, no expectations, no chaos, just warmth and laughter. But the tension with Daniel and Camilla only grew. They called, texted, and left voicemails, each message more frantic than the last. "Mom, you can't do this to us. We need you. The family needs you." Camilla's tone shifted from pleading to angry. "You're being selfish, Rosa. You're ruining everything." I listened to each message, then deleted it. I was done being manipulated. The grandchildren, caught in the middle, started to ask questions. Lucia called me one night. "Abuela, are you mad at Daddy? Did I do something wrong?" My heart broke, but I reassured her. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Grown-ups just have to figure things out sometimes. I love you very much." Sophia, older and more perceptive, sent me a text. "Mom, I know you're not the bad guy. I'm here if you need me." The days passed in a strange mix of freedom and guilt. I missed the noise, the mess, the feeling of being needed. But I also felt lighter, more myself than I had in years. I spent long afternoons in the garden, letting the cold air clear my mind. I baked for the church, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. I read books, watched old movies, and let myself rest. But the family drama didn't stay quiet for long. Word spread quickly in our small town. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering, "Did you hear? Rosa's refusing to help with the wedding. Daniel and Camilla are beside themselves." At church, Mrs. Alvarez gave me a knowing look. "Sometimes you have to put your foot down, dear. Don't let them guilt you." I smiled, grateful for her support. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I found a letter tucked under the front door. It was from Camilla, her handwriting sharp and hurried. "If you don't help us, we'll have no choice but to tell the family about your little secret. Think carefully before you ruin everything." My hands shook as I read the words. What secret? I racked my brain, trying to remember anything that could be used against me. Was it the money I'd lent Sophia years ago? The time I'd covered for Daniel when he lost his job? Or was it something else? Something I'd forgotten? The threat hung over me like a storm cloud, but instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of calm. I realized that Camilla was desperate, that she was losing control. I decided, then and there, that I wouldn't let her threats dictate my life. I would face whatever came next, with my head held high. Christmas Eve arrived, and for the first time in decades, my house was quiet. I set the table for three, myself, Marjorie, and Sophia, who had decided to spend the night with me. We ate, laughed, and shared stories, the warmth of friendship filling the space where family drama used to live. As we exchanged small gifts, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. I knew Daniel and Camilla wouldn't give up easily. I knew there were still secrets waiting to be uncovered, still battles to be fought. But for the first time, I felt ready. I was no longer the woman who always said yes. I was Rosa, a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who had finally learned to stand up for herself. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee and watched the sun rise over the garden, I heard voices outside. Daniel and Camilla stood on the porch, their faces drawn and anxious. I opened the door, my heart steady. "We need to talk," Daniel said, his voice softer than I'd heard in months. I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. "Let's talk." "Let's talk," I said, and as Daniel and Camilla stepped into my living room, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The air was thick with tension, but I was no longer afraid. I watched Camilla's eyes dart around the room, searching for signs of weakness, for something she could use. Daniel looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I gestured for them to sit, then poured coffee for all of us, the ritual steadying my nerves. Camilla started first, her voice brittle. "Rosa, we're sorry if things got out of hand. We need your help. The wedding is coming up, and there's so much to do. We can't do it without you." I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "You mean you can't do it without my money, my time, and my house?" Daniel flinched. "Mom, that's not fair," I held up a hand. "No, Daniel. What's not fair is being lied to in my own home. What's not fair is being threatened by someone who claims to love my son." Camilla's mask slipped for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about." I set my cup down, my hand steady. "I know about the visa, Camilla. I know about the overdue payments. I know you've been using Daniel and me to cover your tracks. I found the letter from the law office. I know your student visa is about to expire." Daniel's head snapped up, confusion and hurt warring on his face. "Camilla, is that true?" Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's complicated. I was going to tell you," I shook my head. "You were going to marry my son, get your green card, and then leave. You said as much at dinner, in Spanish, when you thought I couldn't understand." The room went silent. Daniel stared at Camilla, betrayal written across his features. "You said you loved me. You said you wanted a family." Camilla's voice was small. I needed a way to stay. I didn't want to go back to nothing." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. "You could have told the truth. You could have asked for help. Instead, you lied. You used us." Daniel stood, pacing the room. "I can't believe this." "I defended you. I fought with my own mother for you." Camilla's eyes filled with tears, but I saw the calculation behind them. She was already thinking of her next move, already planning how to spin the story. I realized in that moment that I was done playing her game. I stood, my voice calm and clear. "I'm not going to let you hurt my family any longer. I've spoken to a lawyer. I've gathered evidence, emails, texts, the letter from the law office. I know about the fake parents, the staged engagement photos, the marriage certificate from China. I know everything." Camilla's face went white. "You wouldn't." I met her gaze unflinching. "I would, and I will, if you don't come clean to Daniel and the rest of the family." Daniel looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Mom, what do I do?" I softened, reaching for his hand. "You do what's right, mijo. You tell the truth. You protect yourself. You remember who you are?" Camilla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You think you can ruin my life? You think you can just erase me?" I shook my head. "No, Camilla. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure everyone sees it." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I sat beside him, rubbing his back, letting him cry. I thought of all the years I'd spent protecting him, all the times I'd put his happiness before my own. I realized, with a bitter-sweet ache, that I couldn't protect him from this. He had to face the consequences of his choices, just as I had faced mine. The next day, I called Sophia and told her everything. She listened quietly, then said, "I'm proud of you, Mama. You did the right thing. Let me know how I can help." I felt a surge of gratitude for her steady presence, for her unwavering support. I spent the next week quietly preparing my case. I organized the evidence, made copies of every document, and met with my lawyer to discuss the next steps. I reached out to Marjorie, who agreed to testify about Camilla's behavior and the threats she'd made. Olivia offered to help with the grandchildren. her loyalty a balm to my wounded heart. But Camilla was watching. I saw her car parked down the street, saw her talking to neighbors, saw her trying to turn the community against me. She sent more messages, each one more desperate than the last. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. The family will never forgive you. You'll lose everyone. I read each message, then deleted it. I was done being intimidated. The tension in the family reached a breaking point. Daniel stopped answering Camilla's calls, stopped defending her to the rest of the family. He started spending more time with me, helping in the garden, sharing meals, talking late into the night about his fears and regrets. I listened, offered advice when he asked, and let him find his own way back to himself. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel turned to me. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for not giving up on me, for fighting for us." I smiled, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. "That's what mothers do, Daniel. We fight for our children, even when they don't know they need us." But I knew the fight wasn't over. Camilla was desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I kept my guard up, kept my allies close, and waited for the next move. The night before the final confrontation, I found another note slipped under my door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. "Back down, or you'll regret it." I stared at the note, my heart pounding. For a moment, the old fear threatened to return, but I pushed it aside. I was done being intimidated. I tucked the note into my folder of evidence, another reminder of what I was up against and of how far I'd come. I went to bed that night with a sense of calm determination. I was ready for whatever came next. The truth was on my side, and I would not be silenced. What I had found would turn the whole case upside down. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. What I had found would turn the whole case upside down. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made a list of everything I needed to do, every document I needed to gather, every person I could trust. I started with the basics: copies of my will, the deed to the house, bank statements, and the folder of evidence I'd collected on Camilla. I called my lawyer, Mrs. Ramirez, and set up a meeting for that afternoon. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, her eyes sharp and focused. "You've done well, Rosa. This is more than enough to start, but we'll need to be thorough. Camilla will fight back." I nodded, feeling the weight of what was at stake. If this plan failed, I could lose everything: my home, my family, my dignity. But I was done being afraid. I was ready to fight. Sophia arrived later that day, her arms full of groceries and her face set with determination. "I'm here for as long as you need me, Mama. We'll get through this together." We spent the afternoon sorting through paperwork, making copies, and organizing everything into neat folders. Sophia was methodical, her nursing background making her a natural at triage and order. She called Olivia, who promised to help with the grandchildren and to keep an eye on Daniel. Marjorie came by with a casserole and a list of contacts. Neighbors, church friends, even a retired judge she knew from her days volunteering at the library. "You have more support than you think, Rosa," she said, squeezing my hand. "Don't let Camilla make you feel alone." The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Mrs. Ramirez filed motions with the court, requesting a restraining order against Camilla and an injunction to prevent her from accessing any of my accounts or property. She drafted letters to the family, explaining the situation and urging them to withhold judgment until the facts were clear. Sophia and I met with the bank manager, who confirmed that Camilla had tried to access my accounts using forged documents. The bank agreed to freeze any suspicious activity and to provide statements for the case. Meanwhile, Camilla's efforts to sabotage us grew more desperate. She sent emails to the family, painting herself as the victim and accusing me of trying to ruin her life. She called Daniel late at night, crying and begging him to take her side. She even showed up at my house one afternoon, pounding on the door and demanding to be let in. I refused, calling the police when she wouldn't leave. The officer who responded was kind but firm. "You're doing the right thing, ma'am. Don't let her intimidate you." Daniel was caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to me and his feelings for Camilla. He called often, his voice full of confusion and pain. "I don't know what to believe, Mom. Camila says you're trying to destroy her. She says you're jealous that you never wanted us to be happy. I listened, my heart aching, but I stood my ground. I want you to be happy, Daniel, but not at the cost of my own dignity, not at the cost of the truth. As the court date approached, the tension in the family reached a breaking point. Some relatives sided with Camila, convinced by her tears and her stories of hardship. Others rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. The grandchildren sensed the strain, their visits growing less frequent, their hugs a little tighter when they did come. I tried to shield them from the worst of it, but I knew they could feel the storm brewing. Mrs. Ramirez was relentless. She coached me on how to answer questions in court, how to stay calm under cross-examination, how to present my evidence with confidence. She arranged for Marjorie and Olivia to testify on my behalf, and for the bank manager to provide a statement about the forged documents. She even tracked down the woman who had played Camila's mother at the engagement dinner, who agreed to testify about the staged photos and the fake family. The night before the hearing, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my life. I wrote a letter to Daniel, explaining everything, my fears, my hopes, my love for him. I told him that I would always be his mother, that I would always fight for him, but that I could not let him or anyone else take advantage of me again. I left the letter on his pillow, hoping he would read it before the hearing. As I prepared for bed, I found another note slipped under my door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. Back down, or you'll regret it. I stared at the note, my heart pounding. For a moment, the old fear threatened to return, but I pushed it aside. I was done being intimidated. I tucked the note into my folder of evidence, another reminder of what I was up against, and of how far I'd come. I lay in bed that night, the house quiet around me, and let myself feel the full weight of what was about to happen. I thought of Tom, of the life we'd built together, of the lessons he'd taught me about strength and resilience. I thought of Sophia and Olivia, of Marjorie and Mrs. Ramirez, of all the people who had stood by my side. I thought of Daniel, and of the boy he had been, and of the man he was still becoming. I knew the battle would be hard, that Camila would do everything in her power to win. But I was ready. I had the truth, I had my allies, and I had a new sense of self-worth that no one could take away. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I whispered a promise to myself. I will not give up. I will not be erased. Tomorrow I fight. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I whispered a promise to myself. I will not give up. I will not be erased. Tomorrow I fight. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and cold, the kind of day that makes you want to stay in bed and hide from the world. But I rose early, my nerves taut, my mind clear. I dressed with care, navy skirt, white blouse, the silver locket Tom gave me on our 20th anniversary. I made coffee, but barely touched it. Sophia arrived just after sunrise, her presence a steadying force. She hugged me tight, her eyes shining with pride and worry. You're ready, Mama. No matter what happens, you're not alone. We drove to the courthouse in silence, the city still waking up around us. Olivia met us at the entrance, her arms full of folders and her face set with determination. Marjorie was already inside, sitting near the front, her hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Ramirez greeted us with a reassuring smile. We have everything we need, Rosa. Just tell the truth. Let them see who you really are. The courtroom was packed, family, friends, neighbors, even a few strangers drawn by the rumors. Camila sat at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer beside her, her face a mask of innocence. Daniel was there too, his eyes red-rimmed, his posture tense. I caught his gaze, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who believed I could fix anything. The judge entered, his expression grave. He looked at me, then at Camila, then at the assembled crowd. This is a hearing to determine the validity of the claims against Mrs. Rosa Alvarez and the actions of Ms. Camila Lee. We will hear testimony from both sides. Camila's lawyer spoke first, painting her as a devoted fiancée who had only wanted to build a life with Daniel. He claimed I had become controlling, that I was trying to sabotage their happiness out of jealousy and spite. Camilla dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she described the hostility she'd faced in my home. "I just wanted to be part of the family," she said, her accent thickening with every word. "But Rosa never accepted me. She made me feel unwelcome, unsafe." I listened, my hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding. I wanted to shout, to protest, but I waited. I knew my turn would come. Mrs. Ramirez stood, her voice calm and clear. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Ms. Lee has not been truthful about her identity, her intentions, or her relationship with Mr. Alvarez. We have documentation of a previous marriage, staged engagement photos, and attempts to access Mrs. Alvarez's financial accounts using forged documents. We also have testimony from witnesses who can attest to Ms. Lee's manipulations and threats." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Sophia testified first, her voice steady. She described the changes she'd seen in me, the way I'd been pushed aside, the way Camilla had isolated Daniel from the rest of the family. "My mother has always been the heart of our family," she said. "She's given everything for us. She deserves respect, not suspicion." Marjorie followed, recounting the threats and the pressure I'd faced. "Rosa is the strongest woman I know. She's been taken for granted for too long. It's time for the truth to come out." Olivia presented the evidence, emails, texts, the letter from the law office, the staged photos, the fake parents. The judge examined each document carefully, his expression growing more serious with every page. Then it was my turn. I stood, my hands only trembling a little, and took the oath. Mrs. Ramirez guided me through my testimony, asking about my relationship with Daniel, my hopes for the wedding, the night I overheard Camilla's conversation in Spanish. I described the pain of hearing myself mocked in my own home, the humiliation of realizing I was being used. Camilla's lawyer tried to rattle me. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Alvarez, that you have always been controlling? That you resented Ms. Lee from the start?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I welcomed Camilla into my home. I cooked for her. I listened to her. I tried to make her feel like family. But I will not be used. I will not be lied to." Camilla took the stand, her composure slipping. Mrs. Ramirez questioned her about the visa, the fake parents, the staged photos. Camilla's answers grew evasive, her story unraveling under the weight of the evidence. The judge pressed her for details, and she faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. The turning point came when Mara, my former student, testified. She explained how she'd discovered Camilla's real identity, her previous marriage, and her attempts to manipulate the immigration system. "Mrs. Alvarez is not the villain here," Mara said. "She's the victim of a calculated deception." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Daniel sat with his head in his hands, his world collapsing around him. Camilla's lawyer tried to recover, but the damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The judge called a recess, his voice heavy with the weight of what he'd heard. I sat at the defense table, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I looked at Sophia, at Olivia, at Marjorie, and felt a surge of gratitude. I wasn't alone. I had fought for myself, for my family, for the truth. During the break, Daniel approached me, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have listened to you." I hugged him, my own tears finally falling. "It's not your fault, mijo. We all want to believe the best in the people we love." Camilla sat alone, her mask finally gone. She looked at me, her eyes full of anger and fear. I met her gaze, unflinching. I had nothing left to hide. The judge returned, the room falling silent. "We have heard enough," he said. "The evidence is clear. Ms. Lee has engaged in fraud, deception, and manipulation. The court finds in favor of Mrs. Alvarez. All claims against her are dismissed. Further, The court recommends an investigation into Ms. Lee's immigration status and her attempts to defraud this family. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Camilla's face crumpled, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Daniel sat beside me, his hand in mine, his grip tight. Sophia and Olivia hugged me, their relief palpable. But the story wasn't over yet. As the courtroom emptied, Camilla's lawyer approached Mrs. Ramirez, whispering about an appeal. I knew there would be more battles ahead, more wounds to heal, but for the first time in years, I felt free. Outside, the sky was clearing, the sun breaking through the clouds. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day lift from my shoulders. I was tired, but I was also at peace. I had told my story, fought my battle, and reclaimed my life. No one expected what happened next. The dust had settled, but the outcome was still uncertain. The final verdict would come in time, but for now I allowed myself a moment of quiet triumph. The dust had settled, but the outcome was still uncertain. The final verdict would come in time, but for now I allowed myself a moment of quiet triumph. In the weeks that followed, the house felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I moved through my days with a new sense of peace, savoring the small rituals that had always brought me comfort. The first, cup of coffee at sunrise, the soft hum of the radio in the kitchen, the feel of earth between my fingers as I tended the garden. The ache of betrayal faded, replaced by a gentle pride in what I'd survived and the boundaries I'd finally set. Daniel visited more often, sometimes with Olivia, sometimes alone. Our conversations were honest, sometimes awkward, but always real. He apologized often, not just with words but with actions, helping in the garden, fixing things around the house, showing up when he said he would. I forgave him, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I understood now that forgiveness was not a gift for the other person, but a release for myself. Camilla, for her part, kept her distance. She sent a letter of apology, but I sensed it was more about saving face than true remorse. Still, I accepted it, choosing to let go of the bitterness that had threatened to consume me. Sophia became my closest confidant. We spent long afternoons talking, laughing, and planning for the future. Olivia's visits were a balm, her youthful energy and optimism a reminder that life could still surprise me. She often brought over new recipes to test, and together we'd bake for the church or the local market. She told me more than once that watching me stand up for myself had changed the way she saw her own future. You taught me it's okay to say no, abuela. You taught me that love doesn't mean losing yourself. The support group at the community center became a lifeline, not just for me, but for many others. We shared our stories, our struggles, our victories. I listened to women who had been through their own storms, divorce, loss, betrayal, and I realized that my pain was not unique. We found strength in each other, and I found healing in helping others find their voices. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out an old drawer, I found a letter from my late husband I'd never opened. The envelope was yellowed, the handwriting familiar and steady. I sat down at the kitchen table and read his words, tears slipping down my cheeks. If you're reading this, it means you faced something hard. I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've always been stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You are the heart of this family, Rosa. Never forget that. I folded the letter and tucked it into my journal, feeling his love wrap around me like a warm blanket. I realized that standing up for myself hadn't just changed my life, it had changed my family too. We were stronger, more honest, more connected than we'd ever been. I had learned that love is not about sacrifice without end, but about respect, boundaries, and the courage to demand better. Would you have done the same? I often wondered how others would have handled my situation. Would they have fought, or would they have given in? I hoped my story would inspire others to find their own strength, to stand up for themselves, to believe that it's never too late to reclaim your life. As spring turned to summer, I received a letter from the community center, inviting me to lead a workshop for women learning to set boundaries. I smiled, feeling the promise of a hopeful future. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I faced them with confidence, knowing that I had already survived the worst. I stepped out onto the porch, the sun warm on my face, and looked out at the garden in full bloom. I was no longer afraid. I was Rosa, strong, resilient, and ready for whatever came next. If you've listened to my story, I want to ask you something from the heart. What would you have done in my place? If your own family brought someone into your home who mocked you behind your back, would you have stayed silent, or would you have found the courage to stand up for yourself? Have you ever faced a betrayal so deep it made you question your own worth or the meaning of family? Maybe you've been the one everyone relied on, the one who always said yes, until you realized you were giving away pieces of yourself with every favor, every sacrifice. I know I'm not the only one who's felt invisible, underestimated, or used by the people they love most. Maybe you've been through something similar, a family dispute, a painful divorce, a moment when you had to choose between your own happiness and someone else's expectations. Maybe you're still in the middle of it, wondering if you have the strength to finally say no. If so, I want you to know you are not alone. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Share your story in the comments below. Tell us about a time you had to fight for your dignity, your home, or your happiness. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs to take their first step toward healing. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or the relief of finally reclaiming your life, let us know. This community is here to listen, to support, and to remind you that you are stronger than you think. And if you found something in my story that resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with a friend, a sister, a neighbor, anyone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Don't miss our next story. Subscribe for more true tales of courage, justice, and redemption. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be erased. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that every woman's story deserves to be heard.